Okay, so here are the rails, and here is our show.
Completely off. Completely gone today. What in the world? Derailed.
Yay, you're here. Welcome to the CK and GK podcast. Let's get going.
It's Tuesday.
Yay! We're so glad you're here. And today we're talking about parenting tips. So this will be good for, most of our listeners, I think. So these are parenting tips that you're going to need to know with, once again, the CEO of Empowering Parents, Mr. Kimball Lewis. We're so glad you're here. Welcome back.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me again.
Yeah, we're excited that you're back. We're excited that you wanted to come back and talk to us, given especially this morning's ridiculousness that's happening.
Right. Us recording in the morning. So today I will call Caitlin Folgers because she's the best part of waking up.
Oh, that's a cute one. Well, Jenny over there will sing Soft Kitty to you when you're sick, just like Penny does for Sheldon on The Big Bang Theory. Such a good caretaker.
Soft Kitty. Yes.
I think you might be confusing that with Smelly Cat. That's a little different. Soft Kitty
Right.
is the, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. What are you trying to pull, Mom? From the top. There you go. So let's just go ahead and catch up. Let's get into it. Yeah?
Okay, so should we talk about what I'm obsessed with?
Sure. Go for it.
Okay, so I am obsessed with makeup and I'm not even wearing it. But I'm telling you, I went to a makeup masterclass this week.
Really?
Yes. Well, as part of one of the organizations I'm in, we do a month of training opportunities for our members. And one of them was a makeup artist. I was facilitating the class, but I'm also like there for it. So I might as well learn.
Yeah.
And I have some great nuggets from this masterclass.
Okay.
The first one is when you are putting on eyeliner, and also Kimball, sorry, like I should have thought about this. Like
Kimball's like, this is not applicable to me.
Or he's like
Yeah, I
taking
don't generally
great
wear
notes.
makeup.
Well, and either one, no judgment, right? Like, it is what
Right.
it is. Okay.
Okay. Okay, so when you're putting on eyeliner, instead of like drawing it across your eye, you're supposed to smush it into your lash line. So imagine if you are holding the pencil or brush and you are kind of pushing up as if you're trying to like flick on a light switch.
Oh, weird. I always heard draw dots and then
Right?
connect them. No, that's not it.
Yeah, she was like, don't even try and draw a line. Just up, 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 up. And you start in the middle and you go out, and then you start in the middle and you go in.
Okay, well, that's helpful because I was
Okay.
never one of the people who could do like the cat eye thing. I've never been able to do that. So, okay, good to know.
Oh, yeah,
Good to know.
no. And she even said, like, we're not going to do that tonight. Tonight, we're just going to put on eyeliner.
Okay, great.
It was great.
Perfect.
It was
Easy.
wonderful.
Okay.
She did not try and take us to a place that we weren't ready
Yeah.
for. The next one was apply more product than you think you need. And I feel like this is just like for life, not just for any type of makeup, but just like in general, use more.
Okay. Then you end up looking
And
clownish? No?
no, it was because we were all so anxiety stricken and nervous about doing it wrong. She was like, you can always take it off.
That's true.
You can always remove.
true.
But if you don't have enough on or you've missed a spot,
It's obvious.
that looks
Yeah,
weirder.
You're right. Okay, that makes sense.
Okay. And then my last little tip that she gave us that was like, psh, wipe off the tip of your mascara wand so that you can see a little bit of the silver metal that holds all the bristles in place, and use that tip to separate and kind of direct your lashes after you've applied mascara.
What about all the product that's on the tip though? Like, I don't want to lose that.
No. You wipe it into your container.
Yeah. Okay.
Like
Just
when
makes
you
the top
when you
goopy.
take the brush out.
Yeah, just like kind
Yeah.
of.
But then,
all right.
But then when you put the brush back in, it brings it back into the container.
Okay. I can.
It was it was a total game changer. And again, start in the middle, work out, start in the middle, work in.
Interesting.
Now, here is my giant takeaway from the class.
Okay.
And she must have said this like 22 times. And this is a woman who her Insta handle is at mdh.beauty.
Okay.
She has been doing makeup professionally for like 20 something years. Okay. She may or may not have done some people who are married on Bravo.
Really?
Uh-huh.
You know that's going to pique my interest.
She was so funny. She was, that's
squad.
what I'm saying. I've held on to this. I did not lead with this. I buried the headline on purpose. But she was like, yeah, you know, like their husbands are famous. And I did their makeup when they were on Bravo. Like, she cannot say this, but we know exactly what she did.
She's part of the glam squads. Yes.
Right.
Okay.
So, anyway, mdh.beauty.
Okay.
But she must have said this 25 times. It's no big deal. It's just makeup.
Yeah. It's supposed to be fun, right?
And I was like, you know what?
Yeah.
You're right. Like, it is no big deal. It's just makeup. Like, and I am one of those girls. I've been wearing makeup since before I was allowed to. But it was really interesting to have someone say, like, have fun with it. It's no big deal.
Yeah, as someone who's been
makeup.
smearing, you know, Bonnie Bell Dr. Pepper lip smacker on my whole mouth since I was, 9 years old, that is kind of refreshing to hear, right? Like,
right.
Yeah. So I work from home now. I used to be the classroom teacher, and now I work from home. And so I had to redo the office, which you've seen. You know what it looks like.
Y'all, they have this desk that like has its own zip code.
It's really big, but it's because it's for two people, right? Like, because we have a
It's kind of like if a double vanity bathroom was an
office. Yes. So I have like my setup over by the window so I get some natural light. And then there's the other one in the corner. And there's two office chairs that match. And my office chair wheels were driving me crazy. And someone like put on LinkedIn, like, hey, change out your office chair wheels. And so I put like those rollerblade style wheels on my office chair. I'm obsessed. It is so much easier.
How do you do that?
Oh, you just pop them off.
Are they like universal?
Yeah, you could just pop them off. They have like a little, I just hit my elbow on the desk. That's what that loud bang was. Sorry, guys. But yeah, you just pull them right off, and they have like just a peg that goes in, and they stay in because you're sitting on the seat. So it's not like it's going to fall out. Kimball, do you work from home most of the time?
I do, since 2012.
Doing it since before it was cool. Yeah.
Way back.
You're like a pioneer.
Since before. Yeah, we used Skype back in the day.
Oh my gosh.
But the company I was working with then, it was a startup, and we very quickly went from 0 employees to 70 in 25 states in 2 years. Wow. And we had an office in Washington, D.C. That was our main sort of headquarters. And then another one in Portland, Maine. But we hired everyone with the intention that they would not have to move. So, and that was by design, because we knew we needed really good people, and we weren't going to be able to find exactly who we needed in Portland, Maine, and Washington, D.C. Right. Like, we needed a bigger, and we weren't expecting people to get people to move is hard especially for a small startup. We had like very high aspirations, but we didn't know how it was going to work out. And to get people to move is hard, especially now. Often it requires a spouse to quit their job, and then kids, and the ideal at a startup, I could go on forever on this, but the ideal employee is like mid-30s. They don't need to be managed, but they're not managers themselves. Like, they know how to do the work.
Totally.
Like, they're not rusty. And that's the age that parents usually have kids and other stuff, and moving is very difficult and whatever. So we just said, you guys can stay where you are, and we'll hire you. And if it works out, terrific. And if it doesn't, then you can, you haven't moved, you haven't sold your house, you haven't like upended your life. So
wow. And for our younger listeners, 2012, we actually did have electricity and internet at that time.
Yes.
Oh, and
Skype. Everyone used Skype. That was the only way. A lot of options now. Yeah.
Zoom was not a thing, honestly.
Oh yeah, no. When John and I were first dating in 2013, we would Skype, and I was like, man, this technology is amazing.
Oh man, did you hear that? This is a completely random sidebar, but did you hear that the very first model iPhone, the one that like came out in 2007 or something, just was sold at auction for like $64,000? It's like mint condition, new in box, and someone bought it for $64,000 or something like that. Why? Anyway, all that to say, it's made a difference. My rollerblade wheels on my desk chair have made a big difference. So
right.
Yeah. if you're annoyed by your desk setup and your chair is one of the things that bugs you, look into that. They were like $20 or something, and you just pop your old desk chair wheels right off and put these ones on. It took me 10 minutes at the most.
I want you to like wear wrist guards and a helmet and be like roller girl at work. Like maybe you could get like some lace gloves or like a cool name.
I need a lot of neon. Well, the thing that's really made the difference, I mean, aside from the fact that it actually like rolls smoothly, is that the wheels on my desk chair were so loud. Like I'd be in a meeting and it'd be like, ring, ring. and I'm like, as I'm adjusting myself, like trying to make sure I'm, facing the right way and all that stuff. So it's just a lot quieter. Like it's so much better and it's a lot more smooth. So if that's something that might work for you, then you should do it.
Where do you buy the wheels?
Where do I buy? I just got them off the giant that's
rollerblade.com.
The giant store that sells all the things from A to Z. That doesn't sponsor us and super helpful. Highly recommend. I can put a link. I can send you a link, Kimball, if you want.
No, I'm interested because I'm very picky. Like I want a good chair, but like I've bought chairs for a corporate environment. They're like at least $1,000 each. I mean, like nice chairs in an office are not like, they're really, really expensive. And I'm like at home, I'm like, am I going to spend that kind of money for a chair? But then you buy a crappy chair and you're just like, oh, this sucks. This is terrible. And the wheels,
do you remember the whole episode of The Office where like Pam is buying for chairs and someone else is like, oh, we need to get a copy machine or whatever?
Yeah, it's the chair model.
Now that I know that chairs are $1,000.
Yeah, it's a
start like minimum. You can pay up to $2,000. I mean, they're really expensive.
The nice ones that are nice ones, good for your back and all that stuff. I also have like.
Are you talking about like a recliner?
No, just a nice office chair. It's a lazy boy. So no, it's made a big difference. I mean, and this is not an expensive chair. It just happened that these wheels were recommended, and I was like, all right, I'm going to do this, and it has made a big difference for me. So if you work from home, look into that. It's helpful. All right. Well, do you have any gems from the week? Because
those are good. Since today we have Kimball Lewis, CEO of EmpoweringParents.com. I have some kid quotes for you that I collected this week as my gems.
Yes, do it.
The first one, Caitlin has already heard, so her reaction is going to be a little forced. The second one I have not told her about, so we will have an authentic laugh. Okay. As you know, we are deep into flag football season, and pretty much my kids are playing year round now, which is great and terrible.
So much.
And it's these lousy Friday night games, right? Like Kit, 4 years old, plays at 6 p.m. Abby, 11 years old, plays at either 8 or 9 p.m.
It's not okay. It's really not.
It's not. It's awful. First off, the kids are tired. Secondly,
Friday night. Everyone's tired.
It's Friday.
Yeah.
But aside, we are driving home from a midweek practice. And Kit and I are in the car. And I said, oh, we should stop and get snow cones. So we did. And I got sugar-free pina colada, in case you were wondering. Yeah, we're eating our snow cones. And I said, man, this snow cone's a great dinner, isn't it? And he goes, nah, it's just my night breakfast. Totally called me out. He's like, Mom, I am not going to accept a snow cone
night
as dinner.
Breakfast.
You are going to cook for me when we get home. This is my night breakfast.
Trying to pass off a snow cone as dinner is hilarious. It's literally ice. Like you can't.
Yes. This one had gummy bears in it.
Oh, okay.
It was ice and two kinds
night
of sugar.
Breakfast of champions.
Both the gummy bear and the breakfast and the syrup. Yes, that night breakfast of champions. I just thought, like, maybe he'll buy it. Like, maybe he'll be like, yeah, this is a fun dinner.
I'm tired now. I'll go to sleep right away when we get home. No.
No.
That's hilarious.
No. Okay, so the second one is straight from the mouth of my 11-year-old daughter as I am making meatballs, which is really funny because last week's episode was about dinners that you make when you can't make dinner. Snow cone doesn't count.
No,
apparently.
it does not. You've been called out. Right. You have been called out.
But meatballs was one of the ones I said, like, hey, meatballs. Because you could pull them out of the freezer midweek and just defrost them. So I'm making meatballs. And one of the ways that I do this is buying pre-made sausage.
Okay.
Because it's already seasoned and it's already like a blend of fatty meat and lean meat.
Yeah.
And they didn't have any ground sausage that wasn't in casing. So I just bought a bunch of Italian sausages and then I was squeezing the meat out of the casing. And Abigail looks at me and she goes, that looks like someone taking off their Spanx.
Excuse me, just because it's 10 pounds of meat in a 5-pound bag does not mean that you get to call me out for it. Oh my gosh. That's hysterical and awful.
Oh. Yes, 2 thoughts went through my head when she said this. First is, okay, yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
It kind of does.
Yeah, it does.
Number 2 is, besides me, how many people have
Right.
you seen take off
This
Spanx?
feels like judgment, and I'm not here for it. I don't like it. Mm-mm.
I love that you said people, but what she meant was you.
Right. Oh. No, Mom, I didn't mean you. Who else then?
No, I just
Who
meant,
else?
yeah, who else are you watching take off Spanx?
Oh, and never come into my room again when the door is closed, because now I can't trust that you're not going to judge me about it later.
Right.
Oh man, that's my heart is hurting. Okay, well, we've talked about this a lot. My ADHD is rampant, and my medication wears off in the evening. So I am not particularly detail oriented in the evening as I need to be. So yesterday I am placing a grocery order and I forgot a couple things. And so after falling asleep with a computer on my lap last night, I remembered, I need to order a couple of other things. I'm going to go into the app and just add to the order. And usually when you search, at least with this particular grocery store and the app, when you search, the first thing that comes up is probably something you've already ordered, right? Like it knows that you ordered this thing already. So I was trying to order margarine.
So you can make grilled cheeses.
Yes, this is what I thought I ordered. Okay, this is what I thought I ordered last night after falling asleep and adding to the order. This morning, my husband goes to pick up the groceries, and this is what I actually got. Guys, this is the size of my face. What I thought I ordered.
It is the
what I actually got.
Okay, so
This tub of margarine is the
for our
size of my
listeners.
face. I'm not even kidding. Normal tub of
She
margarine
holds-
fits in your hand.
Yes.
This is the size
I
of a
thought
basketball.
it was going to be one of those situations where I thought I ordered grape Kool-Aid, but what I actually got was grape scented cleaning material.
No,
Or
this
cleaning
is
soap.
a tub of margarine
No.
the size of my face.
Yes, she holds up margarine in a normal size and then says what I actually ordered is this margarine that is large enough for a family of 22
Right.
or a cruise ship.
It is triple the size, triple the weight of what I normally buy. And this margarine lasts what, like a month or two at least, right?
I don't know.
Like, I mean, we don't use it for everything. We usually use butter, but like,
Oh, I meant like what was the shelf life? I cannot tell you.
Oh,
hopefully it's long enough
hopefully
to
it's
get through
8 or 9 months. This says best September 23. So, all right. So it's February now. So I got 6 months to eat.
that. It's a race against the clock. Will she finish the margarine?
Butter
before
on
it
everything for the next 8 months. And not even real butter. Country spread, that is not, it's generic country crock stuff. Yeah, so that was me. That's my gem. This is this morning.
That's amazing.
My husband, he's like, this? Let's just hope it fits in the fridge. So yeah, we have to play Tetris with the fridge now to try and get the butter to go in there. I was like, I can take it back. And he's like, why? It's probably cheaper per ounce. I'm sure it's cheaper per ounce. And we will use it. It'll just take 9 months to do it. And when we're done, we'll have a nice bucket for when someone needs to get sick in the house, right? Because it's that big.
Right.
Oh, my goodness. That's my life, guys.
Okay.
Yeah. Well,
All right. We have to take a quick break. We're going to hear from some friends of ours at Doom Generation. So stick with us. We'll be right back.
All right, y'all know CK and GK love to support fellow indie podcasts. So here's another show you might really love.
Did
Did you grow up with a lack of parental supervision?
Do you know all the lyrics to The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air?
Remember Mayor McCheese and the Fry Guys?
Have an inexplicable love for the California Raisins?
Can you remember Madonna's original face?
Then you might be a part of the Doom generation.
Laugh until you cry with us each week as we stumble blindly through the memories of the movies
And other random things
that doomed us to be the salty, sarcastic, sardonic ladies you want to hang with.
You know us, you love us, you can't fucking live without us.
Doom Generation, available everywhere you find podcasts.
Thanks for listening to our friends. Back to the show.
And we're back.
We're here. And Kimball's here. Kimball Lewis, the CEO of EmpoweringParents.com. Again, thank you so much for joining us and coming back with us. And last time you were here, we sort of got the overview, big picture of some great, helpful, fundamental parenting tips. And you don't need to go through all of those by any means, but if you just want to give us a quick sort of overview of what you guys do at Empowering Parents and how that sort of came to be for you.
So we are empoweringparents.com. That's our website. And most people find us by doing a Google search. They're struggling with some kind of some kind of child behavior problem, defiance, backtalk, all the way up to I'm scared of my child. Like, because a lot of times we deal with parents whose kids can get violent also. And they find us because we have hundreds of articles on our site, very useful practical tips on dealing with child behavior problems. And the fundamental philosophy behind all of our articles they're free on our site. So if you go to empoweringparents.com, you can find all of our articles there. The philosophy behind all of it comes from the work of this guy named James Lehman, who in the late 2000s came out with something called the Total Transformation Program. And it's a how-to manual for dealing with kids who exhibit defiant, obnoxious behaviors that a lot of parents are dealing with kids. Not just like your normal run-of-the-mill stuff. It's the kind that, when you're at your wit's end, you start Googling, what do I do about this? I don't know how to deal with this. These aren't because the parents are bad. Very often a situation is you have two kids that are fine and one of them is hard, just really difficult, and you're not sure how to deal with that. So James Lehman put this program together, and the reason he knows about this is he was one of those kids. He spent his teen and early 20 years very defiant. He ended up being in and out of jails. He lived in New York City. He was oppositional defiant. There's a diagnosis called ODD, which you'll hear about sometimes, oppositional defiant disorder. He was defiant with his parents. He was defiant with the law, everything. So, he finally in his mid-20s was sentenced to either go to jail or go through this accountability-based program that they were experimenting with. And he went through it and it changed his life. And then he went on to Fordham University and then on to Boston University and got a master's in social work. And he spent 30 years working with defiant kids who were just like himself, mostly in group home settings, but also in a private practice. And after those 30 years, he had a formula down for how you deal with kids that exhibit these behaviors. And when he worked with parents of these kids, he's like, you don't need to get a master's degree, but there's some certain things you just need to know when you're dealing with kids like this. And he was able to put that into a course that if you do about an hour or two a week, you can go through it in about 8 weeks. And that's what the Total Transformation Program was. And it's about understanding your kids' behaviors, why they do those things. And then as a parent, what's effective and ineffective in dealing with those behaviors. And he articulates all this. So it's basically a how-to manual on dealing with these kids that are just difficult. They're hard. And he had tremendous success. So it's a program of hope for a lot of parents that feel that they're in a hopeless situation with their kids, because we have the tremendous success rate and it helps so many parents. He unfortunately passed away in 2010, kind of unexpectedly at the very height of his popularity. So a couple years after that, I came in, and back then the way you get content was not through podcasts like this. It was through books and DVDs, and the whole program was a set of books and DVDs that you worked with. And we had parent coaching back then also, so you could call and talk to a personal coach about your situation. But I came in as having a background in child welfare research, but also a technology background, and we put all of this online, so it's modern now. So my goal is to continue to evangelize and make available the concepts in the Total Transformation Program for parents who are just struggling with these issues, and they've tried lots of things, don't know where to turn, and they need help. So that's where we are today.
Well, thank you for that.
And I think we've helped. we've worked with about 500,000 parents over the last 10 years
Jeez.
or so. So it's been a wildly
I
popular
have to
program.
imagine that if you were to check your metrics, your internet traffic is highest round about 7 or 8 p.m., where the parents are pulling their hair out and saying, "What do I do?"
Yeah, that actually mid-after we do this because like we do mailings and stuff, and we want to know like when people are most likely to get them. So
Okay.
mid-afternoon,
Right.
and then 7, 8
Mhm.
o'clock at night, because mid-afternoon people are at
Right,
work
right.
or doing whatever, like not that anyone would look at the internet at work, but they need distraction. So it's mid-afternoon in the evenings, 7, 8 o'clock at night, that's when they start Googling us, and we see it on our website traffic too. We get about 7 million visitors a year on our website, so we have a lot of traffic, and we used to sell just the United States and Canada. We're worldwide, so we deal with, I mean, mostly we're English speaking, but we have lots and lots of customers out of the UK, Ireland, New Zealand, Australia. So, and I think we've dealt with like 30 countries. We looked it
Wow.
up once. There's a lot of expats, English speaking expats all
Parenting
around
is
the
the
world.
same everywhere, right? Kids
Right.
are
It's
kids.
universal. Right.
It is. The concepts are pretty much universal. There's some differences in how cultures deal with it, but in general, when parents are coming to us, it's kind of a universal problem. It's a
Right.
human problem.
Exactly. I mean, I can speak to just having been on the site, myself looking for various tips. And I mean, I might be accountable for 25,000 of those hits that you're getting on that website. Just a few. But I mean, just the practical nature of what's available on empoweringparents.com is actually probably my favorite thing about it. It's like you see so many articles that are like, they say they're how-to articles, but it's theory and it's not applicable right away. And I think that's what sets your program apart at empoweringparents.com, is that it is something that I can go, okay, this is a tip. I can actually use this like the next time I interact with my child, which is incredibly helpful.
For $0.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because
For $0, right? You have all kinds of services that come with associated costs, but there's all kinds of free resources on your website as well.
Yeah, you come sign up for our newsletter. Best thing to do is to come to our website, powerparents.com, and sign up for the newsletter, and you'll get 2 to 3 articles that we'll feature each week. And that'll give you an idea of where you are. It's one of those things where if you sign up for the Total Transformation Program, it's one of those things like the difference between reading some articles and taking a class. The class, often there's an accountability to doing the class, and you see it from sort of beginning to end, so you get the whole picture. You get a little bit of the theory, but then you very quickly get into it's really a how-to manual. To tell you, we actually give you the words to say. Like when your child does X, like what do you say? Because if you've ever been in couples, I think I mentioned this in the last podcast, if you've been in couples therapies before, you realize that there's communication problems is a big issue between couples, but it's the same with kids. A lot of times that we have issues with our kids and stuff, we're not communicating properly with them. And we talk about what words to say. That's the exact words, but basically you need to say this. And we'll also say, don't say this. So and I don't know if I talked about the why trap.
We did discuss that. I remember.
In the last episode. Yeah. So the why trap is, don't ask your child why they're doing something. Just say, these are the rules. Because when you ask why, you're asking for an excuse, and you start realizing, why I'm saying why to my kid all the time. Like, I don't need to know why. I don't need an excuse. I need you to follow the reasonable rules of this household.
And I think also you mentioned in that same sort of why trap idea that it's not only do you not need to know why they're doing it, but also they don't need to know why that's your rule. The rule is the rule because you said this is the rule. You are going to do this, and I don't need to explain myself to you, because just like I don't need an excuse. You don't need an excuse from me either. You're going to do what I asked. So that was one of the ones I.
Yep. And if you're struggling with that at home, and you go to our website, what's one of our most popular articles is explain yourself once and move on.
Loved it.
It's not your job to convince your child to agree with the rules.
Right.
It doesn't have to be that way. That's not so. And we we think you should have reasonable rules in your household based on what your values are. I'm not going to say what your values ought to be, because it's up to your household. That varies by household, and it's whatever the house, whatever, as long as it's not abusive. But I can't say what your values are in your household, and you can't say what they are in my household. And maybe it's not the perfect solution, but it's better than the alternative, which is that
Right.
someone else is
Right.
telling you what your
Right.
values ought to be in your household. So we respect parents. We respect the notion that parents get to make the rules and set the values within their household,
Right.
and that's going to vary.
Yeah.
So what we don't recommend, and you're free to do this, we just tell you, if you come to us and this is what you want, we're probably not the right place for you. And that is, the kids make the rules in the household, or it's a 50-50. It's not. We think that the parents have legitimate authority in the household. They ought to. And not everyone agrees with that. And I understand some of those arguments, but we're probably not the right place for you. And we'd tell you that. We're just like, this, there's some other places you could go to, if that's your viewpoint. We just don't think that's effective.
I think
Right.
that's an interesting point. I mean, so I'm going to kind of pivot a little bit this conversation. We've both been classroom teachers. Jenny's still in the classroom. And one of the things that we talk about for buy-in for kids for classroom rules is having them help you establish the expectations of the classroom, right? Like, and especially, I mean, in middle school, kids know like what general classroom rules are. So the brainstorming session is not necessarily authentic, right? Because they know what they're supposed to say. But there is a little bit more buy-in when you do have kids say, like, this is why we should have this rule, right? So I get that piece of it. But so I feel like that one in particular may not be as applicable to a classroom. But Jenny, I feel like there's something here for you.
Yeah. So if you listeners are interested more in how the total transformation and parents.com is kind of applicable just in the parenting realm, I encourage you to go back and listen to episode 49 where we had Kimball on the first time. But like Caitlin said, we're going to try and apply this in a couple of different unique situations, starting with the classroom. So Kimball, kind of talk to us a little bit about how the philosophy and the ideals of empoweringparents.com and the total transformation program can be applied in a classroom situation where there is a different dynamic. Learning has to be at the center.
Yeah. So we actually, we will actually tell parents that are dealing with these issues we'll tell them to use a school as their model sometimes.
Oh, that's interesting.
Because, so for example, in a classroom, we'll say to parents, if you're having issues with your kids, write the rules down of the household, put them on the refrigerator. So one thing in a classroom is everyone ought to know what the rules are and you should be able to point at them. So if your classroom doesn't have what the basic, you don't have to have 1,000 of them, but sort of basic rules of how you conduct yourself within this classroom, we highly recommend those are written down so you can point to them. And that's for a couple of reasons. One is sometimes some kids don't really know. Like you assume they do because you'd think like, oh, that's just natural. You ought to know that. But sometimes they don't. And the other thing is when they break the rule, you say, why am I getting in trouble? It's because you broke the rule and you point to the rule. It's not because I decided at this moment that I don't like what you did and now you're getting punished for it. That makes it a personal thing between you and the child. You want it to be between the child and the rules.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. So, and I might have used the example before about this, about if you get pulled over for speeding, if there's no speeding signs and it's up to the police officer's discretion as to what speeding is, you're going to get an argument every single time. The police officer doesn't want that. The police officer wants to be able to say, you were going 70, the speed limit's 50. There's the sign. It says 50. You were going 70. That's why you're getting the ticket. Cuts down on the arguments to have the rules. So if your classroom doesn't have the rules clearly defined and you're having issues in your classrooms, make sure the rules are defined.
I like that. And if you are a teacher who doesn't want to post classroom rules, I completely understand that. What you can do is kind of talk about what your community norms are or what your expectations or even your community's beliefs. Because if it says we care about each other's learning and someone is exhibiting a behavior that doesn't reflect that, it's the same, right? You can point back and say, does your behavior reflect that you care about someone else's learning? So I love that. Even if you don't have the rules posted word for word, this is what we do, this is what we don't, even having some core beliefs posted is very valuable. Keep going. Love it.
Yeah. And if your classroom's generally fine, then you don't need that. This is for issues when you're having a problem. And it's actually helpful we suggest these things because it's helpful for the child actually. It's helpful for the child to know that where the boundaries are and sort of what the rules and the parameters are. Kids actually don't like when things are completely wide open and loosey goosey. It actually causes stress. Like they don't know where the boundaries are. It's like, and our roles as parents and teachers are often to set limits. There are certain limits in life, and these are where they are. And kids' job is to test those limits, which they do naturally,
Right.
and we should expect them to. The arguing with kids, we would say, don't argue with the kids. Don't get into it. Don't get.
You don't
dragged
have to
into an
come to
argument
everyone
with-
you're
with
invited.
your kids in the
Right.
classroom.
You don't have to attend it.
Exactly. So it's the same.
And so
So
I'm cheering
So
because
that's-
that was
so-
the theme of the last episode
Yep.
when we were together.
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So that's completely natural as well. And the other thing, I don't know if I talked about this in the last one, but all kids have challenges. Everyone has challenges, whether you have ADHD, whether you have ODD, whether you have you're going through a divorce, whether you're the child of a single parent, whether you have financial difficulties, whether you're in middle school or high school and you've broken up with a boyfriend or whatever. Like very, very, very few people make it through without having like significant issues that they struggle with, of various degrees or whatever. What we caution teachers and parents is to although we all have these things, don't let those become an excuse for the behaviors.
Right.
I couldn't agree more.
Because we're all dealing with stuff. Nothing ever gives you license to abuse other people.
Right.
And we have this thing, there's no excuse for abuse. I don't care how low your self-esteem is. You cannot abuse someone else and be obnoxious and disrespectful for someone else because you don't feel good about yourself. And when you get to the phase of like you're training them as to like what, or talking with them about what they can do next time this happens, that's acceptable behavior, not unacceptable behavior, because you're going to get angry in the future. Here's what you can do when you get angry instead of abusing other kids. So, and it's good to understand, where they're coming from for that, but it should never be an excuse for that. And James Lehman talked about this a lot, which was it's still going on now as much, but probably not as much. But he saw the what they call the esteem movement was moving through the psychology world in the 2000s, and he didn't like that because he saw that, and it was, the concept is this, which is true. It's true that bad behaviors and low self-esteem, there's a very high correlation between those two things. And he saw the world trying to prescribe solving behavior problems by raising the kids' esteem. And he's like, that's just not effective. It doesn't work that way. And he actually saw the opposite happen, which was that he felt strongly that very often the bad behaviors cause the low self-esteem. And that if you can learn to behave more appropriately, your esteem will rise. So his route to improving self-esteem was to coach your child, hold them accountable, and coach them on how to behave more appropriately. And kids who learn the basic life skills of how to behave appropriately develop higher self-esteem as a result. He was always like, and you coach them how to behave effectively when they're not feeling good, when they're feeling angry, when they're feeling frustrated, when they're feeling like something's not fair. They need to learn how to channel that appropriately. And then when they learn how to do that, their esteem generally rises as well. So, and it was all around like sort of effectiveness.
You hear this kind of stuff in classroom management circles all the time, right? It's like when there's a kid who is considered to be like a high flyer or, has issues with behavior in class, you find like the good things that they're doing and then you call them out for it, because then eventually it's positive attention and they like getting that, and it does build their esteem and it changes the behavior over time. And I'm just hearing like, good teaching, right? Like you set the expectations, you have empathy for what the child is going through, but empathy is not the same thing as an excuse, right? It's a reason for the behavior, but It's not an excuse for what's happening. So I just right now I have goosebumps on my arm. Yeah. So that's really good.
Caitlin, I'm really glad you brought that up because James Lehman talks about this. He says praising a child for doing something that's easy or that they're already doing is not helpful to raise their self-esteem. Like he talks about this, like if you're 12 and they tie their shoelace and you go, oh, that's great, you can tie your shoelace. Like, of course they can tie their shoe. They're supposed to be able to tie their shoelace when they're 12. When they're 3 or 4, they learn how to do that. That's fine or whatever. So he's like, that doesn't help. He says, but he does point out one thing, which is that kids that are experiencing behavior problems are getting yelled at and corrected all the time. That's their life existence. They get it at home, they get it at school, they get it wherever. They're constantly having a negative reaction from adults who don't like their behavior. Now, obviously that would get better if their behavior improved. But when they do things correctly, he says it's vitally important when they do something correctly, you need to point it out and go, look, I saw that you got frustrated with Jimmy this period, and I really liked how you handled it. You didn't fly off the handle or whatever. He goes, you got to keep doing that. Keep doing that. You did it. See, you know, you won't be 100%, but like you did it that time, you can do it again. And point out, he talks about not doing it falsely, over the top or whatever. He says, but it's very important because they will have successes here and there. You just have to point it out to them. It's exactly what you're saying, Caitlin. You have to tell them when they've done it correctly, because they're 99%. They're getting not praise. They're getting correction.
There's something to be said for looking at a child and saying, I know that you have X number of hard times, or we all deal with challenges, but I believe you can do better. I am not going to hold you to a lower standard because you have a different story. I believe in you. I know that you can. And I want you to know that I believe in you just as much as the other kid down the street.
And I think that coupling that with a powerful statement of not just I believe you can, but also I've seen you do it. There's actual evidence of this, because I think that those kids also hear things like, I believe in you all the time. And it just feels disingenuous over time. Right. Or, you know what I mean? Or when you say something like, we all have challenges, it's like, well, you're not experiencing my challenge. So it's if you couple that with, yes, I believe you can do it. And the reason I believe is because I have evidence to back it up. I watched you do it this time and this time and this time. So I know that you know how to handle yourself. And I'm just going to hold you to that because you can.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Words are cheap. So if you tell kids something, it means much less than if you show them something. So if you tell them they're great, but you don't hold them accountable for their behavior,
then
it's like you've given up on them, and they start to internalize that. They're like, oh wow, I'm on such a lost cause. They don't even get me in trouble anymore when I do something that's completely inappropriate
or not completely inappropriate, but just a little bit, right? If the standard for Jimmy is different than it is for John, because John's normally really well behaved, but John gets in trouble for chewing gum and Jimmy doesn't. Well, that doesn't feel good to Jimmy or John.
Right.
The standard is the same, and it doesn't matter what infraction has been made. I love that. All right. So looking at time and thinking about where we want to go, I am going to take the conversation out of the classroom and to single parent families or families that are co-parenting and are divorced or in two separate households.
Divorce.
Talk to us about communication strategies. How do we deal with these kind of situations?
Co-parenting, where the parents either totally disagree or are divorced or never married and antagonistic towards one another, is it's one of the most difficult situations. So if you're in that situation, it's not easy. And we'll tell you that ahead of time. Like it's very hard. It's hard enough dealing with a child with behavior issues when both parents are on the same page generally. But when the parents are not on the same page and the child's has behavior issues, it just makes it that much more difficult. So a couple of tenets that we tell parents early on when we work with these parents is in the case of a divorce situation where it's two households, you don't make the rules in the other household, and you can't. And you shouldn't try to.
And you shouldn't try to.
Because
that is hard.
That's a big one.
It's going to use all your emotional energy for something that you don't have the legal right to do. And your 99% chance you're not going to be able to be successful at it. And we're all about do what's effective and don't use all your energies on something that's almost certainly not going to work. And when you're particularly in an antagonistic situation with an ex, and you want to try to set what the rules are, what bedtime is in that household, it backfires. And And in the same vein, that ex can't tell you what the
Right,
rules are
yeah.
in your household. This is a less than ideal situation because you might want to set consistent rules and other stuff around, like either phone usage or
right.
bedtimes or standards of behavior or what movies you're allowed to watch or not watch or whatever. And the rules in one house are different than the rules in the other house. And that stinks. It's hard. It's hard on the kids. It would be best if whatever you can do, if you can find a middle ground with your co-parent, you've got to try to find it if you can, if it exists. If you can somehow, for the sake of your child, find that middle ground, even though you have reasons not to like that
Right.
other co-parent or whatever. But if you're the ideal situation in this, when the parents don't like each other, if they both, and this is what you want to look for, if they both share the same goal of they want the child to be better off and in a good position and dealing with their behavior issues, that's you want to aim for that because you can have, if you have the same goal, you can at least negotiate as to how do we
Right.
reach that goal. But in general, very often in these situations, there's so much animosity going on that the parents will play the kids off each other and do
Exactly.
all sorts of
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
So, but you can't make the rules in that household, and it doesn't, focus on the rules within your own household. And you need to explain to your child that when you're home, these are the rules in the household, and your dad or your mom gets to make the rules in their household, but here's what the rules are, and just focus on that.
Maybe the starting point to that conversation is, what do we both want out of, like, what do we both want for the child, right? Because I always told my students, like when we were, when I was a math teacher, it was, I don't care how you get the solution if the logic is sound, right? You can use this problem solving method or this problem solving method, but if you get to the goal, it's fine, right? I understand both, so I know what your thinking is. That's okay. So maybe it's something similar where it's, okay, we both want to make sure, that Johnny is successful. So at this one particular thing, or Johnny does his homework or whatever. So at least we know that's in common, and let's work towards, right? Think about the end goal and then work towards it from there. That's probably the only starting point that you have, I guess.
Yeah.
And
when parents disagree on how you get to that goal, because that's fundamentally, they can just disagree on how to get there. What we often suggest is you have to be willing to try the other person's what they're doing. You may not agree with it, but we would like to frame it this way, which is say, okay, we can do what you're doing, but let's ahead of time figure out how are we going to know if it's working or not. Let's define how we think it's going to be working or not, and then we'll see how. And we'll wait. In 3 months, we'll see if their grades turn around, and if their grades don't turn around, then maybe we try my way.
I like that.
And at least agree on what success looks like, and then so. But again, that's a ideal case where
There's communication and
both parents, there's communication, and the parents are it's more important for that. They both care about the kids' outcomes, or I should put it this way: they care more about the kids' outcomes than they do about their winning the fight with their co-parent.
Yeah.
Sticking it to the co-parent. There's a lot of people will use their kids to spite their ex. We see that all the time.
So hard.
So when that's happening, because that happens. So one of the other tenets of this whole thing is don't blame your co-parent whose parenting you disagree with for your child's behavior. In other words, don't use that as an excuse for your child's behavior, because at the end of the day, it's your child who's not doing the studying. It's your child who's being disrespectful or not following your curfew rules or whatever. So
they have the capacity.
In your
to
mind,
do
you can
it.
say, "Well, this would be,"
and
they do. Yes,
right.
You need to hold them accountable.
Right, keep it about them.
And you don't want them to use the parent as an excuse.
Well, and ultimately, those kids are going to grow up to be adults, right? So
exactly,
you don't want that cycle to continue into adulthood. So you have to put it on them. You just have to.
Yep. And even if your heart of hearts, you believe that the reason they're doing it is because the parents are not parenting them well. you have about 0% chance of getting that parent to change their style, but you have a very, very high chance of having your child learn how to behave correctly, despite having a parent who doesn't parent well. So this is all, again, it's all about effectiveness and who has agency. So when we talk about agency, as agency is who has the ability to make the change. The child does. And so you want to keep the accountability on them and not let them use, just like, I explained earlier that you don't want them to use low self-esteem as an excuse for their bad behavior. You don't want them to use the divorce as an excuse for their behavior. You don't want them to use the other parent as an excuse for behavior. And I want to point out here, because this isn't always obvious, but when we're talking about these situations, we're talking about what we call good enough parents and good enough households. They don't have to be superstar parents or superstar households, whatever that is. But these are just generally households that they're trying to get by, and they're trying to do, usually the best for their kids. So what I'm not talking about is if you have households for which there's significant abuse, there's significant drugs or alcohol problem or that kind of stuff. Those issues are so damaging that a lot of the stuff we're talking about there's other stuff that's going on that's
right.
more important, more like that you got to solve
hierarchy
those problems.
Of needs.
Like if your house is on fire, don't worry about your parenting until the fire. Right. So, but the vast majority of people coming to us are what we call good enough parents from good enough households. Like there's not anything else going on. Like you're doing your best. Yes. Yep. And that's the vast majority of these issues anyway. But there are situations where there's like really significant abuse or substance abuse going on, so that you can't have a normal household where there's like, serious substance abuse going on. So all of the stuff I'm talking about, when that's what the issue is and parents come to us, we actually won't work with them. We'll say you need to find some local resources that are dealing with this more specific problem, because you've got some big issues that you need to address.
Get law enforcement involved, and then when the issues are calm, you can come back. Yeah, that makes sense.
Right. But triage is natural, right? Like we do have to deal with what's most important. It's just the same thing as like making sure that the kid has breakfast before. Like, of course, if a child is hungry, they're not going to learn as well as a child who's fed.
Right.
That this makes sense.
Right. So the other, trying to think of the other key things on the co-parenting thing. One is, no matter how bad the other parent is, don't talk badly about them in front of the child.
I'm so glad you said that.
Don't keep them out of it. Keep them out of it as much as you can. If you're going through divorce, you can ask the kid if you need to talk about it, let me know. But you don't need to. Kids have confusing enough lives growing up anyway. They don't need to be privy to what's going on in the divorce in terms of like what the issues are or anything like that. They're not your confidant in this, and they shouldn't be. If you need that, find a friend or a therapist. Don't make it your child. Keep them out of it as best you can. My parents got divorced. I didn't know what was going on at the time. And I'm thankful for them for that.
It's hard enough.
Like I didn't know.
It's
like
hard enough.
I was in the dark.
You can't be
and I'm like
it's
so glad I was.
Be a kid who's going through that. You don't need to make it worse for them by using them as your therapist or a pawn.
Right. And they're not capable of dealing with that. They're not their brains and they're not capable of it. And we recommend to parents, don't rely on your child to send messages back and forth to the other co-parent. And don't accept messages from them as like, this is what my dad said. Yeah. My dad said it was okay. Whatever. Talk to the other co-parent. Make sure you have that independent thing. So
that's also relieving for the child. Right. In many cases, it takes away the ability to manipulate another. But it's also nice to know that at 14 years old, it's not your job to have to carry messages back and forth and get them accurate.
Right. Yes. Well, think about like a parent-teacher conference. I mean, I used to teach in a school where there were 72 different languages spoken. So there were times when a parent would show up who didn't speak English, and I couldn't relay the information to them because I didn't have a translator on hand. And the kid would take it upon themselves to translate. Can you imagine how hard that must be for a kid to literally hear two people talking about them and have to relay the messages back and forth? Like that must be really difficult just in that setting. So imagine doing it between two parents who you love both of them, and you just like, you're now in this really crappy situation. So just what a relief to take that off their plate. Definitely stay, like, I would think hey, your dad has a message for me. Great. Thank you for telling me. Tell your dad to get in touch with me, or like, let's reestablish the expectation of, okay, great. Thanks, Dad, for telling me, but you need to tell Mom, right? Like you need
it's
to
2023. There's like 400,000 different ways
just
for you to
text if you can't call, just text. Ugh, okay. What about those parents who are in the same household but have different values about a particular behavior? So it could be anything, but like one that comes to mind for some families is like the use of swear words, right? Like one parent is like, whatever, just use it reasonably. The other one's like, no, don't say it at all. Things like that. How do you approach that conversation with your partner?
So very, very often these happen because the couples bring a lot of baggage into the marriage, and that baggage often, whether positive or not, it sounds like a negative term.
Their own stuff, beliefs, values, right?
They have. Yes, that came from being a child in a household. So certain things might have happened in that household growing up that they just sort of took as like, this is how we did it growing up. And they're trying to imagine, like, we never swore in our household. Like that wasn't and then another household, like we swore all the time. And then when you get married, you have like it's a culture clash basically of what's going on. And like this is a neighbor. He was Irish. I find that this is just I noticed this that like the F word in like the UK,
they say it on TV.
Ireland, it's like
use
it all the time.
I just spent 2 weeks in England and Ireland, and what they got away with putting on television, I was like, you could never do it. Like you can't even put that on Bluey. Like they censor Bluey in the United States. You can't get away. Yes, you're right. Absolutely.
So this guy was a wonderful father. He was just colorful Irish guy next door, and every other word was the F word. And then a company I worked at, we were bought out by a UK company, and the new CEO came in who was British, and he's addressing the now new company or whatever for the first time, and he's talking in front of the entire company, and he said the F word like 5 times.
Like, wow, it's very different.
We're like, wow, and I thought about my neighbor, and that's actually what I talked to him about it afterwards. I'm like, what is it with you guys from
across the pond,
from the UK or Ireland or whatever? Yeah, he goes, what? That's not a swear. That's not a bad word.
Yeah, no, I mean,
so you have to work that out with your.
I guess it's like,
I would encourage parents to not minimize the other parent's feelings about it. And generally, I would recommend that if you think swearing's fine and the other one's not okay with it, the rule's probably no swearing.
Oh, okay. So it's not necessarily a compromise. It's like a
lowest common denominator
situation.
Okay. Yeah, accommodate that a little bit. Another one is some parents are very uncomfortable with sleepovers. That happens a lot, actually.
Especially like, lately.
Right. They want to stay over
like
someone's house.
It's a thing now.
Yeah. And the other ones are so, and there's good reason for that. And you just sort of be respectful of why they're that way. But the compromise might be like, okay, let's meet the other parents first. Let's understand what's going on. It is a tricky situation. Try to find common ground and try to respect the other person's, concerns. And the other thing is realize you're in a new family. It's not the family you grew up in.
Oh, that's so hard.
It doesn't have to be. So for me, we had certain cultural norms in my family that I realized after being married for a little while, like I'm not in my old family anymore. And my wife comes from a different cultural background completely. And like her, what they see as culturally, I mean, it's just different. And you start realizing that I'm not my old family anymore. That was actually very important for me in terms of like marriage or whatever, which is that my family is now my wife and my kids, not my parents and my brothers and sisters. Yes. I know they are part of my family, but they're secondary. My wife and my kids are that's my family. And then you sort of learn how to define what the culture ought to be. I think that's
an important shift, honestly.
And you know what?
I think it causes a lot of problems when people don't have that reframed thinking, when they still prioritize their former immediate family instead of prioritizing the one that they've made, right? Like, and that's a difficult thing to it's a really hard thing to justify in your brain, right? So not blaming anyone who's having a hard time.
They'll put their parents
Right.
ahead of their spouse.
And that's the thing is like when you make a commitment to a spouse, that's supposed to be your first priority, right? And so that is a hard thing to shift in your brain. And I think that people often feel very torn between the two families. So I think that's a really good point. And
Yeah. And one person in the marriage might think that way,
Right.
another one
right.
doesn't.
But then you have conflict again.
And
So, yeah.
and
I just loved the simple sentence of "You're in a new family now."
Mm-hmm.
Like that is something that can be repeated in a loving and kind way anytime these types of issues come up. Because I know I'm certainly guilty of it, saying, "Well, when I was growing up, it wasn't blah blah blah." Well, the answer to that is you're in a new family now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Families change. Everyone's family is different, and mine is different from this one.
and you
right?
negotiate.
Oh.
Yeah. And you kind of negotiate things a little bit as best you can, and you don't always win. But like the swearing thing, I mean, it could go either way, but my general sense would be that you can find other words to use if it's important to the other person, but I don't know. I don't know. So those are challenges. And if you can't figure out how to find a common ground on that as a parent, like couples therapy is great. Like it's a really, you can, and it doesn't have to be one-on-one. Like the church I worked at, we did a,
I think we did. Yeah, we talked about this.
Yeah, re-engage, because my parents taught it too.
So it's just like,
taught,
that's
led,
right, that's right.
you know.
Yeah, so that was.
But there's plenty of groups out there that aren't faith-based if that's not for you.
Right.
And there are lots and lots of specialists out there who work with couples that are in a healthy and strong marriage. They're not necessarily there to keep you from the brink of divorce. They're just there to guide you through communication, especially when you're facing a challenge together.
Yeah. That's super important to think about.
And reading, they say, reading certain psychology books and stuff that are meant for they're not like technical books. They're meant for people that might be struggling with issues or whatever. That often is as effective as therapy because you can learn to understand stuff. So we recommend all those things. Talk about it. You become somewhat. For me, like certain things, I became more open-minded about certain things that I thought the world was like this, and realized that's just how I was brought up, and it's not everyone thinks of it that way.
I'm thinking about the baggage, whether it be positive or negative, but there's only so much room in your house, right? So some stuff has to be purged, and you want partner A and partner B to both have their belongings. So some of that baggage has to go.
Totally agree.
All right. Well,
And with your kids, and with your kids too. When their kids go out, like we're empty nesters now, right? Kids are making their own lives.
They're in a new family now.
Right.
Maybe, who knows? They're going to find someone someday, and then it won't be. They'll decide. What
and you'll have to be
their
okay
thing
with that transition too, of them making their own new family. So you're in a new family now. I love that.
Yep.
All right. Well, with that, Kimball, we just want to say thank you again for meeting with us, for continuing this very rich conversation. And close for us. Tell us a little bit again. Where can we find you?
So empoweringparents.com, and the best thing to do is just sign up for our newsletter, and you'll start getting featured articles every probably 2 to 3 times a week of very, very useful stuff.
Awesome. All right. Well, if you are listening right now and you haven't already touched all 5 stars, do that for us, please. We love, love, love when you do that. We hope that you have a fantastic week. Make good choices.
Yeah. And tell us about, how this episode was helpful for you. We would love to be tagged to tell us all about, anything that you've used from empoweringparents.com, and we'll make sure to share it with Kimball. And you're in a new family now, so prioritize them. Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Hey friends, thanks for listening to the CK and GK podcast. Find us at CK and GK Podcast on Instagram and Twitter, and rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Good Pods, or anywhere else that you pod. See you next time.